What could we do? How could we identify them? How could we help, given that we know people or likely to know people?
I think to begin with, I think to start as people, I think to start recognizing and understanding what depression really is. I understand that it might not be easy for someone to identify the symptoms on a surface level, but I'll give you my example. In 2014, my parents had come to see me. They were leaving, they'd come to see me and then they were heading back to Bangalore. And, I kept hovering around my mother, and, they were packing, they were getting ready to leave. And, my mother kind of sensed something and she said, is everything okay? And I broke down. And I had been having a lot of these episodes even before that, but it's just that I was fortunate to have her around at that point to recognize that. So she asked me all kinds of questions. She said, what is it? Is it work? I was having maid issues at home. So she said, is it that? So she was trying to, is it like a friend issue? Like, what is going on? And I couldn't pinpoint what I was feeling. I just knew that it had a physical manifestation of sort of this pittish feeling in my stomach, not being able to understand why I would just keep breaking down every now and then. There were moments of, not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to see anyone, just no motivation and no drive. And she instantly knew exactly what I was talking about. And she reached out to a counselor, Anna Chandy, and, I think, that's sort of how, my journey began. But had it not been for my mother, who gave me those few extra moments to listen to me or to understand what I'm feeling or to recognize or identify the symptoms, I don't think I would have had the intervention at the right time. So through this film, I think what we're also trying to say is we do not expect people to instantly know what depression is or to understand what the symptoms might be. But I think as society to just become a little more sensitive and a little more aware of our surroundings and the people around us. If we sense not to say that, people don't have moments of feeling sad, but I think what is very important for all of us to understand is that there is a big difference between feeling sad and being depressed. But more importantly, I think for us to just be a little more aware of our surroundings, of the people that we engage with on a daily basis, be a little more intuitive to what they're saying. If there's any change in behavior that you see, if you see, I think, a prolonged sort of lack of drive, irritability, I think these are times as support, as people who might identify these symptoms, I think it's important for us to be, supportive. Not with the intention of being inquisitive, but because you care.
Right. And it's incredible that you had the guts to come out to your family. You felt close enough to do that, and you had that support system. But there may be people who are feeling afraid, feeling ashamed, feeling frustrated. What would you say as someone who's been through it to someone who is struggling to come out but wants to share that, wants to sort of find that security and help? What would you say to that person?
For people like me, I would say that you are not alone. In fact, one of the programs which we'll touch upon later on that the foundation runs is called You Are Not Alone. I want people to know that they are not alone. You're not the only one who's experiencing this. 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 people experience depression once in their lifetime. It is a very, very serious issue, not just in our country, but around the world. It is the next big epidemic to hit the world, to hit our country. And you know, so I think it's okay for people to accept and acknowledge that our body, our minds go through certain experiences, that you are not alone, that we're all in this together. We have to help each other out, and most importantly, that there is hope, which is why I'm here today.
Yeah. No, that's terrific. And you know, you've obviously been through your journey. You took a big risk coming out in, you know, a very visible personality in a very competitive, visible industry. What are some of the things that you discovered or uncovered in your journey that are myths about depression or the stigma around depression that we can help break here, right? Things that people believe that are just not true.
There's quite a few, I think, to begin with, just the stigma itself. And I think it's my own experience that made me realize the kind of stigma that is attached to mental illness. It also made me realize, as a person, as a human being, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to have, you know, you might have everything in the world. There's no reason why depression happens to you. It can happen for various reasons, and it's okay. It's okay to have moments of feeling low, or you know, moments of feeling weak or vulnerable, and it's okay to share your experiences with people. It's okay to seek help. I can speak for myself and say that, you know, I did take medication and it did help. I'm not saying that medication is the only thing. I think you know, it comes with a lifestyle change as well. But I think there's multiple factors that sort of come into the cure part of it. But I think it's very important to acknowledge first. I think for me, the biggest challenge was when I didn't know what was happening to me. But the day I met a counselor, the day I met professionals, the day I went to a psychiatrist, the day I was diagnosed, I felt like half the battle I had won, because I knew what was happening to me, versus in the initial months when I had no clue what I was experiencing or what I was feeling. So I think the fact that my mother was my support system, you know, and she encouraged me to reach out. Of course, I found the strength eventually to go through with that and meet the professionals, to listen to what they were saying, to accept and understand what they were saying. And that was, I think for me, that was half the battle won.
You know, we're a technology industry and we've partly created social media at some level, right? What do you think about social media, and what do you think about the influence of social media on depression? You know, today people validate themselves by how many likes they get on a picture, as opposed to, you know, validation through other shapes and forms. What are your thoughts on social media and its implications on society today, and potentially on depression and mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, you know, social media has been a boon in a lot of ways, but I also believe in doing everything in moderation. And yes, I do believe that a lot of what we see on social media is a slightly glorified version of what our lives probably are. We choose to highlight, or most people, I think, choose to highlight all the positives. So I think for someone who's sitting on the other side and just consuming somebody else's feed, I think you end up feeling worse about yourself because you're only seeing certain highlights. Right. I do see few, but very few people who probably, you know, share maybe a slightly lower moment in their life. But I think it's important to consume it in moderation. We work in the field of mental health, and I think we know the advantages and disadvantages. And I think, yeah, I think, like I said, I think moderation is key.
You know, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the foundation. And, you know, so talk us again through the thinking. You know, why first the thinking of, maybe start before that, the thinking of coming out, right? You obviously were diagnosed in January 2014. You came out a year later. So why come out? Why talk about it so publicly and risk so much, one? And then talk us through the journey of why set up something that can sort of scale, institutionalize solutions to the problem.
To be very honest, I didn't think of it as a risk. I thought of it as a very, very personal experience that I went through, life-changing, if I may say. And I think my intention solely was by coming out, if I could help save even one life, then I think the job was done for me.
I was telling Deepika in the green room that we have a lot of regard for the fact that she came out and to use her celebrity to bring focus to such an amazing issue. So that's really incredible. So thank you for that. But talk about the foundation. Talk about the setup of the foundation.
To be very honest, I don't think, I mean, the foundation sort of came up much later. I think for me, initially, it was really about just sharing my experience with people. I wanted people to know second by second, minute to minute, exactly what I went through, because then somebody else listening to an interview might be able to identify. And I've had a lot of people come up to me after that and say they've successfully treated depression and come out, you know, happily after having seen certain interviews or interactions. And for me, that was the purpose, because in a lot of ways, it's not tangible. In a lot of ways, there are no real signs and symptoms the same way I'd guess, you know, maybe some other illness has. So I think for me, initially, it was about taking people through what I went through in detail, for people to identify what I've experienced. And also to send out the message that it's okay. You know, I've been through something like this, and any of us can go through something like this. And that it's okay to seek help. Right. A lot of people acknowledge that they may not be feeling their best, but I think there is either their own stigma or stigma, you know, pressure from family to not come out. A lot of people just don't make the effort to seek help. And I wanted people to know that, you know, you should seek help. If your psychiatrist prescribes medication, that it's okay to take medication. And then, of course, I realized that, you know, that there was so much more work to do in this field. And I mean, we're very, very new in that sense. We set up the Live, Love, Laugh Foundation in 2015. It's only been 3 years. And we successfully ran 3 programs. One was the campaign that you just saw. It is India's first ever public, you know, media awareness campaign on mental health, which we launched last year. We do a school program called You Are Not Alone, which we've delivered in over 8 states. Over 50,000 students, over 1,000 teachers, and that program has been extremely successful, and we plan to run that for many, many more years. Basically, educating students and teachers about what depression is, to be able to identify the signs and symptoms. We also have a program, a doctor's program, called Together Against Depression, where we encourage general practitioners. I think a lot of the symptoms are a giveaway, and I think a lot of general practitioners fail to recognize these symptoms, because a lot of symptoms of depression are physical symptoms, but they fail to sort of link the mind and the body. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it is something that they touch upon in their curriculum while studying, you know, to be doctors, but I think somewhere along the way, I think probably that is not the focus. So to kind of bring back the focus on the importance of the mind and the body, we wanted to start a corporate program, but we realized that there's a lot of work left to do in these programs that we're running currently. So that's what the foundation is doing. We also do a rural program where we've reached out to, we've basically covered the entire district of Davangere in Karnataka, and in fact I visited them last year, and it was just so amazing to see how advanced they are. They have clinics that they run. We finance these clinics where we have doctors coming in, treating people who need help. and basically creating the awareness. But we actually went in to create the awareness, realizing that there is already a lot of awareness. It was actually pretty amazing to see how in rural India, to see the kind of awareness. Well, I wouldn't say rural India, I would say in Davangere specifically. The amount of awareness levels there really amazed me. I came back so hopeful, you know, and to know that our job was just so much easier.
Why the name? Just out of curiosity, what's with the name? The Live, Love, Love Foundation.
For me, it stood for hope. I think it was very important for me in my entire journey. I think for me, hope is sort of very, very significant in this entire journey. So it was important for me, and I think when you use the word or the term depression, people feel like a weight on their shoulders, which it is if you've ever experienced it. But I wanted people to just feel like when we talk about depression, while it is what it is, to also know that there is hope and to give you a feeling of positivity. And somewhere, because I realized that it's also not just treating the illness, but also a lifestyle change, and to really live, love, and laugh.
Yeah. And how much time do you get to spend on it, Deepika? Obviously, you've got other professional commitments, so how much time do you get to spend on the foundation? Do you get to spend enough, the amount you like, or?
I mean, it feels strange to sort of answer this question, because to say that I spend X number of hours a day, if it's not productive, I don't think that would make any sense. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the term that I think success is, proportionate or equal to the beneficial footprint that we leave behind in society. So I think it's important for me to see actual change. I think that for me is important. When I go to a Davangere, when I see people saying that the frequent visits by the team has cured somebody, that for me is success. I think that for me is knowing that we're in the right direction and spending our energies in the right place.
I want to turn to a couple of questions on technology, right? So I'll just share some statistics again which baffled me. India has only 0.3 psychiatrists and 0.07 psychologists for every 100,000 people in the country. Also, health insurance in India only covers physical illness and not mental illness, right? So given this, and given this paucity of resources and experts, what role can technology speak? We're speaking to a bunch of people who are technologists, who live and breathe this. How can we leverage technology to bridge this gap, perhaps?
I'm going to answer this question very honestly. I'm not an expert in the field, so I'm not entirely sure. I do know that technology can play a huge role at least in creating the awareness, for sure. But I also feel like in my own experience, I can tell that touch and feel is very important. So physical proximity, physical presence, a one-on-one sort of, which I think to some extent technology is taking us away from that. So yes, I think it can help in a lot of ways, but like I said, in my own experience, I think to have people around me, their physical presence, that really helped me on my journey.
Yeah. So given your experience, there's no replacement to having that psychiatrist and that psychologist help you, as opposed to sort of having a gadget, perhaps?
I know there are lots of, I do know that there are lots of tech-based, there are a lot of apps, and I don't know how successful these things are, to be very, very honest. I would have to do a deep dive and see how successful these, sort of apps are. But, I do think that I'm sure there are some benefits. But having said that, I think something like this, I don't think you can entirely cure with just technology. I think we will need the intervention of doctors, of professionals in the field.
And again, voices like yours, voices like the foundation can raise awareness, limited budgets in the budget this year for mental health, limited experts. I think creating awareness can create more resources, more money going to this. Let me turn to my last question, and then we'll open it up in the interest of time to the industry. The IT technology industry employs 4 million people, and if we believe what the World Health Organization says, which is 1 in 2 people will suffer depression, and I read 1 in 5, I apologize, and I read a staggering report by ASSOCHAM which said 42.5% of corporate employees suffer from depression. Let me repeat that. 42.5% of people. So effectively we're saying 1 in 2 people here perhaps is depressed, right? And so what, and that's not, I don't mean to make light of it. That's a serious and very concerning
I like
issue.
that everyone's laughing.
Yeah. And so what can we as organizations, as employers be doing? What can we be doing in terms of facilities? What can we be doing in terms of culture in companies? What can we be doing to help people address this? Because it's a serious concern.
I'd be interested in knowing how many of your companies actually have a full-time psychiatrist or a counselor coming in, or how many of you...
Is that enough or not enough? Is that clap say that's enough?
Okay, first of all, are we even aware of the fact that this is something that is important to us? After today or before this session?
Yeah, but are we doing enough? Have you... What do you think we can be doing better?
I would want to come back next year and know that these figures have come down drastically. I think that's the only way to tell that companies and organizations are doing enough. I think it's very, very important to address the issue. It is the next big epidemic. I cannot stress on that enough. And I think it trickles down. In fact, I want to, I want to make it sort of mandatory in my very small organization as well. I'm an organization of maybe 4 or 5 people. But I want to make it mandatory in my own organization now, where I want everyone to reach out to a counselor or a psychiatrist. I think that's very, very important. I think also the fact that for people to understand, for people in the position of power to understand that people with mental illnesses should not be treated differently. I think there is a lot of stigma also because if most people went to their boss and said, I need some time off or I'm experiencing depression, they're more likely to lose their job. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I think empathy in a situation like this, I think knowing that, I'm going to say we, are equally capable. I went about doing my work the way I would in any other phase of my life. Completing my commitments, doing everything that I did, in spite of having this monkey sitting on my shoulders. So I think it's very, very important for people like us to not be treated differently, to know that we're equally capable. I think it needs people in the place of power to look at their employees with a little more empathy, and to know that our place of work, we can only be successful if the people who work for us are giving their 100%. And if you have people coming in every day and clocking the number of hours that they're supposed to, but they're mentally not there, what's the point?
But Anna Chandy, your chairperson in the green room, shared a very interesting point that you were at your peak of your career and you were highly functional.
Yeah.
So you were depressed clinically, but fully alert and fully productive.
Yeah.
So at some level that dichotomy also exists, that you can be very, very productive in your work settings and yet be depressed.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to comment on that.
No, like I said, I think, of course, I would physically, mentally, emotionally find it very, very hard to get up and go to work every day. But I guess it would be a lot worse if my boss said, you're fired tomorrow because you're depressed. I don't know how that would work. So I think it's important to deal with people who experience mental illnesses with a lot more empathy, a little more heart. And I think it's really, really important for every organization to focus on mental health and to ensure that you have a counselor coming in, you know, or psychiatrist coming in. Everyone may not want to disclose, you know, maybe people want to keep it confidential, and that's entirely up to them, but I think it's important to have that facility within every organization.
All right. So I'm going to open it up for questions, and we're going to stick to the subject of mental health. So I'm going to take only questions on mental health, yeah? So if there can be a mic is there a mic that's going around? Why don't we start? Ashank, please. I hope those work. They're tricky. You have to hold them very close.
Is that a mic?
Yeah. You know, it may be easier to get mics. It's going to take people a while to figure that thing out.
Technology?
It's a...
Check, sound check. You can use this.
We can hear you, but people behind you... I can repeat the question. Why don't we go ahead in the interest of time?
Yeah, thanks. Great initiative. I'll come straight to the question, as Rishad will stop me otherwise. We talked of technology, we talked of psychology, medicine, but I think our ancient scriptures have talked, may not be of this problem as such, but have talked about the concepts of non-duality in Upanishads, or Zen Buddhism has handled this problem much more harmoniously, much more non-intrusive way. So my question is, did you look at that as one possibility, or would you be willing to look at that, the great work that you are doing? I can very confidently talk about that because I very feel strongly about that.
Sorry, look at what?
See, in our scriptures, Upanishads, people have talked about non-duality, Advaita, or in Zen Buddhism, in a similar way, in a different context. But that is much harmonious, non-intrusive way to tackle the problem that you have.
So in other words, alternative ways of looking at it outside
So my
of
question was,
perhaps.
did you look at that, or would you be willing to look at that as one of the possibilities?
Are there alternative ways to solving the problem at some level outside of medication? You know?
I wouldn't know, sir. You know, to be very honest, I'm sharing my experience of what I went through. Are there alternate ways? Maybe there are. I wouldn't endorse it. I will endorse what I have experienced.